It's official. We made it. It is the 2025 NBA draft. It is here, and we are ready to see what happens. We are going to spend one more episode previewing it, talking about some hypotheticals, talking about some of the prospects that we like, and then also taking a look at some of these trades that have happened because a lot has changed over the last handful of days. Apologies for no Tuesday episode. I was out of town Monday, Tuesday, so I had pre recorded episodes on Saturday and Sunday. On Sunday, probably, I mean, less than an hour, but like probably like 30 minutes after I finished recording a mock draft, the Kevin Durant trade happened. And then a bunch of other trades have happened. So I was like, is this even worth putting out? Because so much has changed. Opted not to, didn't get back till late on Tuesday. So didn't have time to record an episode. But we're going to make up for it today with some very fun, very special guests. We got two guys coming over from Dizzle Dynasty. Zach and Brian will be joining us to preview this draft class. And obviously, we've already talked about it a lot, but now it is the day. We're going to find out a lot about what the NBA is going to look like. I'm assuming that there will be a lot more trades on the way as well, which will change this landscape a little bit. And then, of course, we'll have some recap episodes and some analysis episodes over the next few days and into next week. Before I bring them in, I just want to remind you guys that BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball season in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, and even live in-game betting. From MLB, UFC to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. Those aren't the only futures available. BetOnline already has odds for next season's NBA champions. If you want to get on that action. OKC is obviously the heavy favorites, but then the next few teams are Cleveland, Houston, New York, Orlando, the Lakers, the Timberwolves. So anybody else that you think is like a sleeper pick probably got pretty good odds, but then it's also wild to see some of these teams up at the top just because of all the injuries that have happened. It's going to be a very, very fun, interesting season that's probably going to be impossible to predict, but that's what makes the gambling side fun. And then in between these games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. And you can also head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, and now we have Zach and Brian here with us to talk about the 2025 draft. We'll talk about their process a little bit. We'll talk about some of the trades that have already happened, as well as some prospects that we're either higher or lower on. Egor Demin is definitely a player that we're going to make sure to get Brian's take on because I need someone to convince me. I need someone to come on here and actually be really positive while talking about him. And Brian, we'll start with you. Before we get into any specifics, just how are you? Because that's important to me. And two, how has this overall draft cycle, this draft process been for you this go around?
First of all, thanks for having me. And second, I really enjoyed this draft class. It's a lot more top heavy than last year. Whereas last year, I feel like we could have had a lot more takes differing from the consensus. This year, I feel like it's a lot more straightforward. And I really like the top. I really like the upside swings that are there. And then once we get to that like 8 and on range, it feels a lot more up in the air to me. And I feel like it's a lot more just pick your flavor. And I'm really enjoying it. And I would say I'm having more fun this year than last year just because the top guys are so much better.
Definitely. It's a more fun class. I think that's pretty safe to say is that obviously starting with Cooper Flagg and then getting on to Dylan Harper and a lot of other players. It's a lot more fun to scout some of these players than it was last year where it was just kind of like, yeah, like you said, it was just changed person to person based on who you liked could be the top player in your class or other people could have them outside the first round. But I know this is Brian, like you said, welcome. This is your first time on here. It's great to have you on. Zach, welcome back. How has this process been for you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me back, man. It's fantastic to be back. The process, it's been crazy. I feel like I've changed so much on this class. I feel like it's been a really fun class. First of all, there's been a lot of fun names. I feel like, especially in like the last month or so, I've seen so much that people have kind of turned on the class a little bit. I think there's a lot of people who just feel like the class is a little more ugly down below. I'm still excited about it. I think there's going to be a lot of gems. I had a fantastic time scouting this, especially with Brian. I feel like we did so much more than we've done before as far as the scouting and a lot of the nitty gritty. So yeah, I'm really excited for the draft to happen. I feel like I'm ready to see how this pans out after so much theorizing.
100%. Yeah, it should be a really fun one, as we've been saying before, and it's already been pretty wild because it's not just the players that we're excited about, which it did kind of get dwindled down a little bit by a lot of players returning to school that I think we were kind of excited about seeing where they'd end up. But that NIL money talks. So understandably so, some of these players opted to just go back to school, which is totally fair. And I think good decision for some of these guys. But as far as some of the trades that have happened, obviously I would say the most notable one is Kevin Durant being traded to the Rockets. And that was in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 overall pick. I'll start with you, Brian. What was your overall thoughts on this trade? And then I guess since we're kind of focusing on the draft with the number 10 overall pick now being with Phoenix as opposed to in Houston, how does that kind of change where you expect them to go with that pick?
So my immediate reaction to this deal was, I'm sorry, Phoenix fans. I just feel bad for them. And I mean, the Rockets, I feel it's fantastic. Like there's like no downside to this. They get off the Jalen Green money, which in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong on this, it probably felt like it probably cost number 10 to get off that deal, just considering how long and overpaid he is. And then it's Dylan Brooks and 5 second-round picks for a Hall of Famer, for a guy that can really put up numbers still. I think it's just a home run. And then even if Kevin Durant doesn't re-sign in Houston, they get off the money. They're a big market. They can find someone else that can fit in that spot. And then for Phoenix, shooting guards galore. No point guards there that are really high-level passers. Jalen Green, I get why they would take him and take the chance on him, but I just don't think this is going to work. And to me, Phoenix is worse, significantly worse than what they were this past season as currently constructed. There's got to be more moves that they make. And obviously the number 10 pick, I know it's like, oh, it's a lottery pick. It's super interesting. But like historically, these late lottery picks, they can be really hit or miss. You have your Zaire Williams, your Cam Reddish, Jalen Smith, former Phoenix Sun pick. I do expect Phoenix to look for a big in this position because the bigs that are on the market, your Nick Claxtons, maybe your Derek Lively's, they're just too expensive, or with Claxton, the money probably doesn't really work. So I would expect them to look at Thomas Sorber, maybe Colin Murray-Boyles, maybe Derik Queen. I feel like that one might be a little bit more of a reach considering that they're already bad defensively. And the other possibility I could see is them trying to move down, maybe trying to get a few picks, and then maybe trying to get like a Ryan Kalkbrenner, get Jace Richardson, which I feel like is just funny at this point that they with the Michigan State connection. But I feel like if they were able to move down and get multiple picks, take multiple swings at it, and fill out the roster, I feel like that would be the smart move. But obviously, we'll see what they do. And considering that their track record with Matt Ishbia as the owner, I would expect something to happen that probably confuses us in some way.
That's a very fair way to put it. And I think, it is kind of an iffy fit with Jalen Green, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker currently. I don't think that's in question. Maybe they're able to move Bradley Beal, but I would say it's fair to say that Jalen Green still has talent, but maybe being around Devin Booker helps him actually kind of realize that talent. Maybe he turns into being better than I thought he could be in Houston. So I get kind of the vision there a little bit, even if right now on paper it's like, okay, yes, you do have 3 guys that are shoot first shooting guards or score first shooting guards, and then a lot of other holes. So I have in the latest mock over at Roto World that we did, Thomas Sorber going to Phoenix at 10. So I do think that's a really good fit, but it is going to be interesting to see how they attack the point guard position. Maybe at 29, they go a player like a Cam Jones or a Ben Seraph or some other guard there because Tyus Jones wasn't a great answer there. Or maybe they just want to put the ball in Devin Booker's hand. We'll see. Zach, what is kind of your takeaway from this deal?
Yeah, so huge for Houston, huge for everyone in Houston involved. I think it's fantastic for Ahmed Thompson to have a mentor like Kevin Durant in the mix. Dynasty value wise, especially, I think both are very secure going forward. So I'm a big fan of that. Like Brian said, I'm sorry, Phoenix fans. I mean, it's unfortunately this was always going to go nightmare mode considering what they paid for Kevin Durant. It was always just going to be, for less. It was always going to be what you didn't want, but definitely disappointed by what they did overall. I think Jalen Green still has talent. I wonder if there is something to be said about potentially rerouting Jalen Green. I don't think we can rule that out potentially, and I don't know exactly. The concern then becomes who's going to take Jalen Green, especially on the contract. Now, maybe Brooklyn is looking at him, considering they have some money. They, with the Kristaps Porzingis deal, they just got Terrence Mann. Maybe there's something there. I think where I stand, just bottom line, is that Jalen Green just needs to figure it out in Phoenix. Maybe he can with Devin Booker. They're definitely worse, but I don't think this is awful for Phoenix considering like what could have been. So deal wise, not great, but they got something back. Maybe they can figure something out. Now I think for the 10th pick, I agree with you guys. I think Thomas Sorber is probably the pick. I wouldn't rule out potentially keeping the hometown guy with Carter Bryant. I think that could make some sense. Just kind of sticking with your front court. I think that's really what needs the most addressing. So my order would probably be Sorber and Carter Bryant first and foremost. And then I think you can also look at, maybe if like Common Malawach fell, maybe if there was something about Derik Queen and they were interested, maybe Colin Murray Boyles as well. Maybe Noah Essengay, if a lot of the smoke about him potentially going to Toronto or somewhere like that could be, fake and, he falls down. So I don't know. I think definitely front court needs to be addressed in totality. And I think that, if your guards are going to be Jalen Green and Devin Booker, it's going to be bad, but, there is something there. So.
Yeah, definitely. Another trade that was, this one I guess was centered around guards as opposed to a forward, but Anthony Simons headed to Boston in exchange for Drew Holiday, some second-round picks tossed in there as well. Zach, I'll start with you for this one, if you don't mind. With Simons now in Boston looking already very different. We'll talk about the other Boston trade here in a second. And now Drew Holiday in Portland. And then I don't know if these are credible reports, but reports that Drew Holiday is frustrated or angry. I don't remember the exact word, but mad that he was traded to Portland, didn't want to be there. Does that, what's your overall take on what this situation looks like?
So, and Brian can certainly attest to this because I've told him and ranted to him. I wasn't a fan of this move for Portland personally. And I think, I think we can certainly say that Drew Holiday could be argued as the better player right now. Especially for the defense he brings. I think they're both fairly equal, but I guess my feeling is that, especially I guess where I stand, especially on the money thing, is like, Anthony Simons was expiring and they traded for Drew Holiday and then they gave picks on top of Simons. Like it was kind of a weird trade to me. So it's just kind of weird. I wasn't a big fan of this one for Portland. Now, for Boston, I thought it was fantastic. Maybe they choose to keep Anthony Simons. Maybe they choose to eventually bundle him up and trade him. But I'm definitely a big fan of that move for sure. I think Boston did really well in that trade, especially just getting value back and getting off Drew Holiday, especially with picks to boot. I think it's pretty crazy. But I'm a big fan of this move for Boston for sure. And I guess to kind of play devil's advocate as far as what Portland was thinking with adding Drew, maybe you want someone who can kind of, take a step back and isn't going to be your top scorer like Simons was. I mean, maybe you want someone to kind of push, Scoot Henderson, be that sort of mentor. Maybe you have a lot of faith in what Scoot and Sharp ultimately do. And, it's kind of just, subtraction in the sense of just making everybody better. Maybe that could be the case, but yeah, just in general, I feel like the value just wasn't great for what Portland did, even though fundamentally I can understand the thought. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more okay with Portland doing it than I think I've seen most people be. Partially because there had been rumors weeks ago that they were going to look to add a guy like Chris Paul as like a mentor for Scoot Henderson. And maybe they thought Drew Holiday could be that guy, but at the same time, they made kind of a late push to almost be a play-in team. Sure. And so maybe they're like, okay, we add in Drew Holiday and maybe we give the keys of the offense to Scoot as opposed to Anthony Simons. So it's more shots for our young guys, but Drew Holiday's there as a locker room guy that has won championships and is a really good defender. They already have a number of strong defenders specifically Tumani Kamara. And then I think this is more through mocks, but maybe they're able to add another really good defender with the 11th pick. And then that's a formidable defense. So maybe they're just ready to make a postseason push and just nobody's expecting them to because it's Portland. And Drew Holiday would help with that. But it's going to be fun to see Anthony Simons in Boston for sure. Brian, what are your thoughts on this trade?
My thoughts are pretty similar to Zach's, honestly. I'm feeling a little bit more okay with it. Like, I like the idea of it. They have this defensive culture and identity that they want to implement. And Drew Holiday obviously helps with that. I think this team gets better next season, and I would expect to see them in the play-in. As much as I like Denny Avdia, I don't think he's a number one option. I'm not even sure he's a number two. And I feel like this team ceiling is just capped. And also the issue is that they are paying Jeremy Grant and Drew Holiday $70+ million when they're 37 and 34, I think, respectively. It's just going to be a mess. And I feel like they're just going to be kind of aiming for purgatory in some ways. And I don't think that was a great process. I like the idea of it, but I also feel like they could have gotten a different mentor in some ways. Like, would they have been interested in getting CJ McCollum back? Maybe that's something that I may have been a little bit more open to instead of just going for Drew Holiday, even though that they are looking for that defense. I feel like there's just other ways they could have gone around it. And as for Portland, I fully expect them to take a defender at 11.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense. And I think the way that this works for Portland, maybe this is just in my eyes, is that they probably just believe in their guys more than everyone else. I think that just is totally fair, totally makes sense. That they're like, yeah, the guys that we drafted and have been developing that we're in the gym with, we think that they're going to take steps and be ready to be a postseason team next year. And if everyone on the outside doesn't believe that, like, I think it's still fair for them to believe that. But I think from an outside perspective, it's definitely fair to be pretty critical of the way this trade went down. But we'll talk about the other trade that Boston made. And Brian, we'll start with you with Kristaps Porzingis headed to Atlanta. And then I believe it's George Niang headed back to Boston, and then Terrence Mann at pick 22 headed to Brooklyn. The Nets just kind of swooped in and said, yeah, we'll help alleviate some money there so this trade can go through. And yeah, sure, we'll take our 5th first-round pick. So they're now armed to make either some trades or add 5 first-round picks in this class, which I think could be a lot of fun. Brian, what's your overall thoughts on the way this trade went down?
So I actually really like it for every single team. Boston gets off Kristaps Porzingis, gets George Niang, who is a local guy, is a great locker room guy. They could flip him at the deadline, I think, if they really tried. I think it's also funny to have Sam Hauser and George Niang on the same team. It just feels really funny to me. Brooklyn obviously gets a first-round pick and take on Terrence Mann's contract. I mean, Terrence Mann is fine. He's fine. I don't know why Atlanta was so keen on getting him last offseason, but it is what it is. Now, as for Atlanta, I really like this in the sense they're getting more shooting around Trae Young. They get some defense. Obviously, there's the question of the health and the random illness that he had during the playoffs. But I really like the idea of it to push because the East is wide open, and adding Kristaps definitely makes them a playoff team. And then we just feel bad for the Onyeka Okongwu holders in Dynasty because the sell high has been slammed shut, at least for right now. I just think he is who he is, and I think the Hawks just see him as that, and maybe they trade him at some point, but I think we have to say that if Okongwu is going to break out in fantasy, it's not going to be on the Hawks. But Kristaps, really like it for Atlanta with all of their other defensive pieces, and it also opens the paint a little bit for Jalen Johnson's drives and for Trae Young to drive and kick as well.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of it more than what I expected actually, I guess, end up being like, because the idea
Mm.
of healthy Kristaps Porzingis running pick and pops with Trae Young sounds like a ton of fun. The Hawks figured out last season, having a shooting center next to Trae Young works really well for some reason. Like Clint Capella was a ton of fun there for a little while, but having a center that can shoot threes, like they had it when Trae Young, I think it was like first 2 years with Dwayne Dedman, and that worked out pretty well. But like Dwayne Dedman as your center on a contending team doesn't work out super well. But Kristaps Porzingis, when healthy, like that could work incredibly well and be a lot of fun. And looking at it as they basically gave up two reserves that were okay role players, but not giving up a ton, and then giving up the number 22 pick. I think it's fair if Porzingis is healthy, but based on his recent health, it does concern me a little bit because he didn't play a ton of games in Boston, and prior to his last season in Washington, he wasn't playing a lot. And then the fact that it was just giving up the number 22 pick to make money work. I don't know. I would have rather been able to hold on to that pick, but I understand there was a few $1 million difference there. So hopefully they're still able to get a good player with the 13th pick and have this be a pretty good team. But Zach, what are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with both you guys on that. I think, like you said, Noah, like the idea sounds fantastic. It's just really the matter of, can he be healthy? Can he really play the role? I would anticipate, and maybe you can speak to this more since you are a Hawks fan and you can kind of have more of an idea of fit. I guess the idea would be that you can play whoever starts, but I guess you could also theoretically play Jalen Johnson, Kristaps, and Onyeka Okongwu all in one. TBD on if that can work, but I generally like the idea for Atlanta. I see what they're going for, and I think it's a good swing to make in general. But I agree. I don't love having to give up that 22nd pick. And I think there could be, especially in the mocks that we've done and stuff like that together and independently. Certainly they were targeting a big. I wonder if there was something better about getting like one of your like Maxim Reynolds or Ryan Kalkbrenner's for sort of that cost control and being able to keep someone long term, especially if you do believe that Onyeka Okongwu is the guy. So there is that, but I do like the idea. As for Brooklyn, I mean, they crushed 5 first-round picks. I mean, they got so much ammunition to build with. I think that they are just gonna. Maybe they trade up. I mean, they got so much to work with now. I have no idea exactly what the intention is going to be. But I mean, they did fantastic. They did exactly what they needed to do. And then I mean, props to Boston for getting off getting off Kristaps ultimately and just getting. I believe that move also did put them under the second apron, I believe. So props to them for just getting off that money, getting off Drew and Kristaps within a quick period, and getting real stuff to show for it. So all in all, I just think like Boston, with both those moves, just did really great. But yeah, no, I agree. I think this is great for everyone involved.
Yeah, it could. I'm trying to think how much I'd like that lineup of having Jalen Johnson, Okongwu, and Kristaps there. I think it would be probably with Dyson and Trae. But then it depends on how well Okongwu's going to be able to defend on the perimeter, which I don't think he's a liability, but I don't think like Kristaps would be. So it's like how it would depend on the lineup they're going against, but like it could work on the offensive end, I think for sure. Just in the sense that Okongwu has gotten better as a shooter. Porzingis is obviously an elite shooter, and then Dyson isn't great, and Jalen Johnson's getting better in that regard as well. But one more trade I want to talk about before we talk about just strictly some of these prospects, and that is the deal that sent Jordan Poole to New Orleans along with pick 40 and I believe Sadiq Bey as well in exchange for CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second-round pick. Zach, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the way this trade went down?
Yeah, so I initially was not a huge fan of this for Washington. I think that Jordan Poole is certainly the best player in the deal, most definitely. And I think that, I think that New Orleans did a great job getting him, and I think he's going to be a great fit for what they have. Good move overall. I mean, they get a pick, they get Sadiq Bey, who I still think is a guy. And then, I think Poole's just going to be like a really good fit there. So I wasn't a huge fan of it for Washington initially, but I think just kind of considering more of the cap space they have. I mean, they'll have over $100 million in cap space. I believe next summer is when it'll be. So I mean, they got plenty of stuff to work with for like a lot of the big fish, anyone who comes available, being able to lure anybody, take on stuff for trades. I mean, that's so much flexibility. So it's not the return itself is not ideal, I think, for what I expected for Jordan Poole. But, you know, maybe that kind of speaks to the same thing as Anthony Simons, where like these types of guys are just not as valuable as they were like even a couple years ago. So maybe, you know, just the cap space in itself is kind of the desired outcome. So to which, if that is the case, I think that both teams did pretty well. But I definitely like this one more for the Pelicans being able to get the best player in Poole. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the cap space thing is pretty interesting because this isn't 10 years ago where you were getting monster free agents signing with you and you're giving them a ton of money and it's whoever has the most cap space. But the point you made about taking on bad contracts and probably picks being attached to them, having that cap space for Washington to be able to take some of those contracts on. So if somebody just wants to get off a player, they can attach a pick or two and Washington's like, yeah, sure, we'll take it. And they get more draft picks. And then sure, yeah, go ahead and make your money here. You know, it's kind of cool for some fans to be able to watch you play and you could be a good locker room player. I mean, that's what they have CJ McCollum for now. That's what they have Chris Middleton for. There's someone else in Washington that is, Marcus Smart.
Yeah, Marcus Smart.
So that's what they have those players for. So I think that aspect of it is good for Washington. And obviously, I was looking at New Orleans roster yesterday. Like, this is going to be a really, like, if everyone stays healthy, and I think that's been the case for years now. If everyone stays healthy in New Orleans, it's going to be a really fun roster. DeJounte Murray, Jordan Poole, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, whoever I think they picked 7 and 23. So yeah, this is going to be potentially a really fun team. Brian, how do you feel about the trade?
So I think this is actually a classic win-win situation. Washington gets off the money. Jordan Poole, great locker room guy, but they also bring in CJ McCollum, who can do the exact same thing. Is not an expiring contract. They bring in Kelly Olynyk, who's great for a rebuilding team. It's a stretch 5. Maybe helps out Alex Sarr in some way. And they get a future second-round pick. Great. They probably didn't need 40 as it was. For the Pelicans, they get the better player, obviously, in Jordan Poole. They get another shooter around Zion. They get someone who can handle the ball, run a little bit of point guard with DeJounte Murray out for the season. Probably could play with DeJounte if it comes down to it. Another guy that reportedly was really good for the locker room. They get Sadiq Bey, who is another shooter that can come off the bench, and they get pick 40, which I don't know who they're targeting, but it'll be a good pick nonetheless. My immediate thought with this right now is this is Troy Weaver's fingerprints all over it. Troy Weaver is the president of the Sadiq Bey fan club. Drafted him in Detroit, traded him to Atlanta. He then goes to Washington, signs him. Sadiq never plays for him, and now trades back for him in New Orleans. And then where was Troy Weaver last season? In Washington, where he saw Jordan Poole be a good leader and mentor for these young guys. So now he's heading to New Orleans. Is this a coincidence? No. My immediate reaction to this trade really was just, why not? Sure. Like, why not trade these guys for each other? Because I guess it makes more sense. But more I think about it for New Orleans, I really like it. I think it also does make me a little bit worried about like someone like Jordan Hawkins' value. Even someone like Jose Alvarado. Probably indicating that their ceiling is probably a bench player, best case scenario. But again, as it was previously mentioned, New Orleans has a really interesting team. If they can just stay healthy, as we've said every year for what feels like the past decade. But yeah, I'm a fan of this move on both sides. And I get the money aspect too, that they're blocking in more money for the Pelicans. But it's also like, who's signing with New Orleans? Especially with all like Dyson not coming out and being like, yeah, that franchise is cursed. DeJounte Murray saying similar things. It's like, who's going to want to go there? They need to help that reputation. Maybe Jordan Poole helps with that, honestly. I could really see that. And Poole was a really important player on that Warriors team that won the championship. And he's going to probably be the second or third option. I would hope Trey Murphy's number 2, but maybe Poole ends up being number 2 just because of the way that Poole likes to take shots. And Murphy's been used to being a role player. But overall, I think a really good win-win trade for both sides.
Yeah. So that's some of the major trades that have happened already. There's obviously been a couple others that aren't quite as landscape altering. I'm just going to double check. No, there haven't been any blockbuster trades while recording, so that's good. But it's also kind of lame because there's no big trades for us to talk about. So we'll talk about some of these young guys, and we're going to start with Egor Demin, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. Brian, I'm really gonna need your take here because I see the vision. I see the tall elite passer, and I think, wow, that could be a lot of fun. A guy who's, I mean, depending on what you look at, 6'8", 6'9", and can really pass the ball. But I think I struggle to see him doing much else, and I think that's kind of where I'm like hesitating. It's like, yeah, like that's fun. A guy that's 6'9" and can pass the ball, and then there's reports that he's working on his shot and he's improving that, but I struggle to see where he's doing much else. So can you talk to me a little bit about why you're really high on him as a prospect?
So I'm going to start with my process with Demin. So I got to look at him a little bit before he committed to BYU. And I was like, ooh, this guy's kind of interesting. There's a really good passer here. He's playing off ball. Hugo Gonzalez is running the show for their international competitions for Spain. I was like really intrigued. And then I also, the day before he committed to BYU, and for what it's worth, I know some people on the YouTube can see, Zach has a Cleveland jersey on. I'm currently at BYU for what it's worth. So I also kind of have to rep it a little bit. And so like I saw the report of being like, he got offered a scholarship at BYU. And I was like, that's really weird. I told Zach that as well. Like, this is really interesting. And then he committed there and I got really excited. Now, the other thing that's also worth noting, personally, I like big guards. I had Josh Giddey top 5 in 2021. I really liked Cade Cunningham. I just like these toolsy wing guard type of players. So I fully acknowledge that while there could be some inherent biases because I am at BYU, this is not someone that I'm just liking out of the blue because I've never liked players like them before. This is just the type of player I tend to like. I also want to be pretty clear when I say this. Egor Demin has some horrific advanced numbers. Egor Demin has some horrific conference stats that, honestly, when I did my initial scouting report, shameless plug, by the way, on my Twitter, I've been posting a lot of scouting reports and on DizzleDynasty.substack.com. I was shocked that they were as bad as they were because when I was watching, and I watched a lot of Egor Demin for obvious reasons, I never felt it was that bad. Obviously, there were some shots where I'm like, dude, what are you doing? There were times where I wanted to pull my hair out. I was like, what? Like, because he feels like the ultimate tease. I feel like he doesn't realize how good he is. He's a 6'9", 6'10" ball handler that is an elite level passer. Would be probably a top 10 passer in the NBA if he came in when he comes in tomorrow. He sees the floor super well. He sees it so well that his BYU teammates were not ready for him a lot of the time. So I think a decent amount of the turnovers, I don't know I wouldn't say half, but maybe a third of them were probably just his teammates botching the possession or just not hitting a wide open shot. And it was frustrating watching them because it was just like, come on, this guy's unbelievable as a passer. And it still felt like he was the second best player. But oftentimes it just felt like with the tees, with the scoring. I have the in-conference numbers here, and they're bad. 2.2 BPM, 95 offensive rating, 46 true shooting percentage, 22.1% from three, 24.9 turnover rate, and a 1.3 offensive rebounding rate in conference play. Obviously not good. Fully aware of that, right? One of the things I noticed specifically with Demin was he got overwhelmed by physicality quite a bit, and the Big 12 is a very physical conference. I noticed as time went on, he got better with dealing with physicality, dealing with those doubles, and obviously sometimes his teammates weren't ready. Sometimes he threw bad passes. It happens, right? And I think a decent amount of those bad turnovers were against Houston, and Houston just plays so differently to everyone else. So it makes it a little tough. But another thing I noticed with Madrid, there were games where he was really locked in, and you saw the flashes where you went, oh, this guy's a real stud. And then there are other games where he just completely disappears. That happened to BYU quite often, where he would just vanish, he wouldn't score, he wouldn't be aggressive. hinting to the tease that I was saying earlier. And then there are other games where I'm like, oh, wow, you are really locked in. You're really cooking right now. And especially the NCAA tournament, I think he played pretty well. I know some people have been a little iffy because he hit some threes. I think he can shoot. And the main thing here is I get the percentages are not good. I can't understand Kevin Young, who could have been the Nets head coach this past season. I mean, they went with the better hire, I think. But Kevin Young, high-level coach. Why is he allowing someone who shot 27.3% from three this season to have a 50.3% three-point attempt rate? That doesn't make any sense. And I think, to me, it comes down to he believes he can shoot it. All reports preseason were, oh, he's cooking in practices. He's drilling threes. And if you see his shot form from when it was at Madrid to where it is now, there have been genuine improvements. Now, there's a lot more improvements that need to be made. Obviously, his base, and I think his positioning needs to be fixed a little bit. But I think there's real touch there, and there's clearly he's confident enough to shoot it. I would venture to guess he probably shoots between 35 and 36% from three in the NBA at some point. On top of that, the passing is obviously it's great. The turnovers, I think they'll come down. Defensively, I think he competes. He's not an elite athlete, but he's 6'9". He's got some size. If he's your worst defender and you're starting lineup, I think you're feeling pretty good. And I think he'll get stronger. I feel like he's already gotten stronger from when I've seen him. And I think he'll be able to deal with physicality eventually. The other thing I've also seen as I've been at BYU is he's just a really good person. He's someone you really want to root for. He's very in tune with his emotions from what I've seen. And that's another thing why I think he can disappear in games is if he's not having a good start, he'll kind of not check out, but like kind of get in his head a little bit. He's been a great teammate. Like teammates loved him. He was constantly talking about how great his teammates were to him and how much they helped him out. And he is competitive. And I've noticed that quite a bit. Even if he's not hitting shots, there's other ways he's impacting the game. If it was up to me, where I want him to go, I want him to go to a place that has a coach and a staff that is going to make him tick. That's going to push his buttons and make him figure out how to be competitive and aggressive at all times. The sneaky team for me is the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think Chris Finch would get in his head. I think Anthony Edwards would really help him out. He has that ability to like be genuine and be a really good teammate, but also push him. And Demin as a point guard would only need to facilitate for this team. They could play Rob Dillingham off the ball, and with Demin's size, you can do that and unleash Dillingham's elite shooting. Obviously, Dillingham can pass too, and there's obviously lamps you can do with that. And Demin's also big enough defensively where you can at least put him on some forwards. I really like Brooklyn as well. He's going to have an opportunity to maybe the shot comes around. He can be a good facilitator. And Jordy Fernandez is an unbelievable coach. They'd find a way to utilize him. I know some people online have been like, yeah, but he can't score without a ball screen. They set ball screens in the NBA, guys. I think he'd be fine. I really don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as some people think. Obviously, there's the Utah of it all. And as I'm at BYU, I guess I'll comment on this. I don't think he's fallen past 21. I don't think they're going to move up to get him, though. I think that he makes a lot of sense on the Jazz. I like him a lot more than I like Isaiah Collier, and I would start him over him day one, but that's also me. I think that even without the connections, it would have made sense, but obviously with the connections with Ryan Smith, Danny Angel being former BYU alum, I think it makes some sense there too. Obviously there's Washington, which I feel like that can make some sense as well. Obviously from the Oklahoma City tree, they tend to like these type of guys. I feel like they tend to value a bit more defensively than what OKC has done in general with what their draft picks have been. But I think Washington would make some sense with setting up like Alex Sarr, and maybe Bub becomes an off-ball shooter, and I think it works out pretty well. And then obviously the Thunder. I don't see a way where they take them, but especially with Topic there. But I think obviously it's worth mentioning that because they've gone for these players in the past. And obviously for the player comparisons, we've seen a lot of Josh Giddey comps, right? Mm-hmm. Personally, I do not like that comparison. As someone who really liked Josh Giddey, he was a lot bigger. He was a lot more aggressive getting to the paint. He was able to use his strength to get positioning and create space. Demin doesn't have that, just point blank. And Giddey also had a lot better advanced numbers, but also I think Demon's a better shooter than what Giddey was at this point. Giddey's obviously a hard worker. I think Demon's a similar mold with that. I see a lot more, and honestly, you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, Noah. I really like the Vit Krejci comp.
I like that.
I knew that was coming.
Especially with Demon being able to play off ball at Tucson at Madrid. If he shoots it, I think it's like a Vit Krejci, or even like a better Vit Krejci. Maybe like a worse shooting version of Joe Ingles.
Better Vit Krejci? Is that possible?
Yeah. I think so.
I don't think there's anybody better than Vit Krejci, but continue.
Yeah. But I think there's like a lot of outcomes where he's like a really good role player, even if the shot doesn't come around. And then obviously if there's any ability to get outlier on ball scoring that tends to just develop with some outlier players, then obviously I think there's going to be a real stud. Like absolute best case scenario. Hear me out. Taller Tyrese Halliburton. I do not think it's going to happen. I want to make that very, very clear. But he's a really good passer. He's got size. And if he shoots it, we can have similar conversations. And there's a similar conversation with the aggressiveness as well at times. I would not bet anything on that happening. And I don't think they're even – Halliburton's a better prospect. I had Halliburton way higher than where I have Demon. But we can get a little creative. He's tall. So I'm just willing to hear that out. And then obviously I think there's the Sean Livingston comp, which I think that makes some sense as well as an interesting outcome there. But I also fully recognize he's not everyone's cup of tea. I get the advanced numbers are really bad. I get that he went missing in games. But I also tend to value elite skills, and I value big ball handlers. Mm-hmm. Demon ticks both those boxes. And I'd be fine swinging on him if I was a team. And even if he doesn't work out, I feel like there's a really good role player outcome for him and you could probably get on a pretty decent deal long-term that would be a good complementary piece for your star or even as a backup guard. So that's my sales pitch on Egor Demin.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love the BYU insider information. I didn't know we were going to get that today, so that was really cool. I like the Brooklyn, Utah, Washington fit just because I think it's going to take time for his body to develop. I know you mentioned like he got stronger as the season went on. I think it's just going to, even though college basketball is a different style of play, it's a new level of strength that you have to play in the NBA. And if he's going to be able to do more than just pass or hit shots, like if he's gonna be able to get into the paint at all, yes, he's gonna have to get stronger. Like that's just what it is, and to be able to defend. So I think those situations would be good for him to slowly develop, unless it is going to be a situation like you mentioned in Minnesota, where maybe he doesn't play a significant role early on, and then as he gets stronger, maybe as the shot improves, as he gets stronger, then yeah, maybe it is more of a long-term play for them. We'll see if that ends up happening. Zach, I don't know, are you as high on Egor Demin, or are you still like kind of high, somewhere in the middle?
Somewhere in the middle, probably. Certainly not to Brian's level, but I certainly do see the vision, and I feel the same way that I do really like these big ball handlers, these types of guys. And, you know, it really just comes down to just like the classic, like eye test versus like the stats test. You know, I mean, when you watch him sometimes when he's really on, I mean, it's just, he's great, you know, like he's looked fantastic, especially early into the season. You know, he was going as high for me as like third, fourth overall in my big board, you know, and this was like very early, mind you. But, you know, Brian and I were very interested in this guy from pretty early time. You know, like this is just a kind of guy that we could see, you know, we've seen a bunch of times. I'm not saying he's going to be Luka, of course not, but these types of guys, are valuable when they really hit. I mean, like it's one of the most valuable things you can find if they hit. So I certainly understand someone like swinging for the fences on it, and I think it's a good swing to take. I think for a lot of those teams that you mentioned, the Washingtons, the Brooklyns, even Minnesota, if they want to give that a whirl. So yeah, I really like Yegor still, for sure. Certainly more than I've seen some people who are pretty out on him, but I would say I'm like pretty medium on him.
Yeah, I see the vision. Zach, who do you want to go to talk about next? I'll give you the pick.
I guess we can talk about Derik Queen. I've been kind of interested to pick your guys' brain about him.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
go for it.
Yeah, so Derik Queen. What can I say? He put up great stats. I mean, the counting stats were certainly solid. I mean, when you watch him, he's hype. I mean, he's a great player. When you watch him, he's especially at the college level. I mean, he crushed all year. He was really great for Maryland. I was very in on him for much of the cycle. He was someone that kind of just consistently stayed in my top 8 range, I would say. Highest at one point for me with it was, I think, maybe 5th or 6th or something like that. So I've been pretty interested in Derik Queen. Fantastic offensive player. He's got great passing. He's very big. I mean, when you watch him, he's just, and that's kind of like where it comes down though, is like, and that's why I've sort of dropped a little bit since I had seen him at Maryland, was just that, the athletic testing was just not good. I mean, it just wasn't. It's not ideal for someone who's probably going to play either the 4 or the 5. When you don't have the athleticism, when you don't have the, mind you, he could end up shooting. I guess we'll see about that. I'm not going to totally close the door on, shooting or anything like that. But, it just comes down to the fact that it's like, it's hard to see how the defense translates. It's hard to see, exactly like where he plays in terms of positioning. And just, conditioning wise, all fair questions. He's a big guy. You can certainly see it on tape. And, even from the fact that he had lost weight, I believe it was reported like 20 pounds in total. He's lost since, he was in high school. It's certainly can get there. And I think slimming down would do him some good as far as just finding that exact spot. But I don't know, man, he's a tough nut to crack. I feel like I was very interested in him for so long. And I feel like for a bit, I was able to kind of hand wave some of those concerns in terms of like the athleticism and, whatever it may be, just because I felt so strongly about him as sort of that initiator. I mean, he's no Alperen Şengün, I want to be clear, but I think there is an Alperen Şengün like outcome for him in terms of being an offensive player. And so I think I've just kind of come down from that a little bit because I'm just a little bit worried about exactly how that looks, when you kind of peel it back. I mean, the idea is fantastic, but the actual guy, I mean, it's certainly some concerns. So I really wanted to just kind of pick your guys' brain about Queen, kind of where you stand. I mean, certainly from a dynasty perspective too. I mean, he's going to be very, coveted from people for what he has. I mean, he is a great passer, like I mentioned. He certainly puts up the numbers to really interest you. But I guess in a realistic sense, where do you guys stand on Derik Queen?
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I think he's a really talented player. I think I'm excited to see where he ends up because I think there's a couple fits that I really like. I've talked with Matt Lawson a handful of times on this show about it. A place like Washington at 6 or San Antonio at 14 or OKC at 15, some like really fun landing spots where he could play the 4 and be next to a taller shot blocker that can also move and defend on the perimeter if needed, to kind of make up for some of the defensive limitations there. But then there's also some teams where maybe he just plays a pretty large offensive role. Like maybe it ends up being, I don't know how much I love this fit just from a team standpoint, but like New Orleans at 7, where like he's not a great shooter, but maybe he can space the floor enough to give Zion some extra room in the paint. But then it's the defensive question marks, but maybe rotating him with Yves Missi kind of helps out with that. So it's interesting. I'm excited to see where he ends up, but I definitely think he is a dynamic offensive player. The athletic testing was definitely not what we wanted to see, but at the same time, this guy was balling out even with poor athletic scores. So like, I don't know, maybe like you said, if he slims down and works on some things in that regard, gets stronger, gets slimmer, gets a little quicker, maybe he can be even better. I don't know, Brian, how do you feel about Derik Queen?
I really like Derik Queen, and he was one of my favorite players to watch this year at Maryland. He's just got so much swagger, and then he just finds a way to impact the game. I didn't expect the athletic testing to be as bad as it was, but I still think that he's just a guy that impacts the game and can really just impose his will on the game when he wants to. I will say I have said it in my report that he is somewhere between the Alperen Şengün and Vernon Carey Jr. scale, and I think he's probably somewhere in the middle with
Break
it.
my heart, Brian.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry. The fact that he's undersized, a 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan, I just feel like it's going to be a little bit harder than it probably should be for him. I feel like he's going to be a good energy big, maybe a spot starter. I think he's a really good passer. There's real star outcomes for him, but I have cooled a little bit. And this is coming from someone who had Derik Queen in the lottery all season long, even at the preseason, until like recently, just because everyone else some of the players have been jumping up, and I've just been a little bit more skeptical about the size with the limited athleticism. There's real faller potential here to me in the draft, and maybe he goes to 18 to Washington. I think you could even see that as a possibility. But I really like him for fantasy, and I think he's going to be a really interesting pick for dynasty drafts, and I would imagine he probably goes top 10 in cases if he goes to a spot where he's going to play.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to start referencing the Alperen Şengün, Vernon Carey Jr. scale more often. Just use it to just kind of put every NBA player on that well-documented scale that now it's just going to become what I use. That's how I measure players now. Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with Derik Queen, where he ends up landing. I think that'll be a pretty big factor. For the sake of not taking up more of you guys' time than I said I was going to, we'll hit some quick hit sleeper. It could be late first round, early second round, even late second round if you really want to get crazy with it. If you want to get super crazy and give me your favorite potential two-way player, then go for it. But I'm going to start with you, Brian. Who's a later round pick, a sleeper pick in this draft that it could be from a fantasy standpoint, it could be from a general NBA standpoint, but somebody that's going pretty late that you're excited about?
Okay, so I will not take as much time as I did last time, I promise. But Kobe Sanders, big ball handler. I can't quit with it. And I think that there's potential to shoot. He really improved from his time in Nevada to Portsmouth. And I think that he's got the potential to be a real role player. I'm not sure he's going to be a full-time point guard, though he did run a lot of good pick and rolls at Nevada this past season. But I think there's even some sneaky Kyle Anderson upside here, where I think he can just be like a do-it-all wing that impacts the game. For fantasy, I think there's something there. There's a diverse skill set, but I'm not sure he's going to put up crazy numbers, especially since that he's got scale from not just college, but a mid-major conference. As good as Nevada was, and as good as that conference is, it's still not the same level of conference as some of these other guys were playing at. So I still expect there to be maybe a bit of a jump, and maybe it doesn't happen in his rookie year. Maybe it's a sophomore year jump, but I still really like him. I really like Elijah Martin as well. He's just a dude. He really knows how to play. I know for fantasy, I think he's going to be not very good. He wasn't even really great for fantasy in college last year, but I think he's just going to be a really good winner. And maybe in really deep leagues, maybe you take him with your second round pick, and maybe he ends up being a decent player for a contending team. Kobe Bryant can really shoot it, and I feel like there's some sneaky upside, maybe a little bit of ball handling there. Maybe you can find some way to hold up defensively. I think there's a real potential as a good 3-point streamer in deeper leagues. Just looking through my list here, I do still like Peyton Sanford as a flyer, another 3-point shooter. He apparently played all season hurt, so that the efficiency was not very good. But I feel like we have a good reason for it now, and I think he's still out with it. I think it was a labrum injury, if I remember correctly. But even though he's not great on defense, I still think there's some potential there. And I guess a really interesting super deep sleeper that I'm not sure I would take him in a draft, but I do really like Jonathan Pierre out of Belmont. He's really toolsy. He's a little skinny, but I saw him throw some really interesting passes at Portsmouth. He can shoot it a little bit. This is one where, if as an undrafted free agent, if you have an ability to stash, I think this would be one I would look at. Hasn't really played a ton of high level basketball either, so maybe there's some more development there.
Yep, that's a phenomenal list of in-depth, very late round prospects. Zach, do you have any more for me?
Yeah, I got a couple. So probably my favorite one, and this has been somebody that I know Brian and I have both really been a fan of, even dating back to last draft, is Jameer Watkins out of Florida State. I'm just kind of a sucker for guys who can be that like energy, do it all type wing, sort of like a Vince Williams Jr. I just really love a guy like that, and I think Jameer Watkins can certainly be something like that. He's interesting for sure. He's an older prospect. He wasn't, Florida State wasn't a super great team, when he was there, but I think he really does check a lot of boxes. Great defender, very physical. He's got good, height and wingspan for a wing, I think. I think the shooting mechanics are good. I think the thing about the shooting is really going to be the swing for him, and I think he can shoot it. As Maxwell Bomback from No Ceilings, he tweeted this before, but Jameer Watkins has made 41.3% of his spot up threes over the past 3 seasons on 196 attempts. So I think he can shoot it. I believe the number from his most previous season shooting from 3, I believe it was 32%. So it's not great, but I think he can shoot, and I think that's really going to be the key. But he can kind of do it all. He is a good passer, good rebounder. He's very physical. He moves off the ball really well. I think it's just really going to be about the shooting ultimately. I think it's just really about finding the ability to shoot, being able to just take his versatility and just make sure it can apply to the league, especially as a rotation wing. But I think he's got a lot of juice. I'm excited to see where he ends up. As far as fit, I would love to see him on a variety of teams. I think, Toronto's been one I've seen commonly. I would selfishly love him for Cleveland, I think, with the 49th pick. But I think he could really fit on mostly any team. So I'm a big fan of Jameer Watkins for sure. Otherwise, I would say a few other guys I like. I really like Kobe Sanders, like Brian mentioned. I know people don't like him, but I still am a Dink Pate believer. Really bad stats this year. I don't even feel like I want to go into it because they're so bad, but not good. He really needs to go somewhere that can shoot, man. That's really the key. He needs to be able to learn to shoot. But I mean, my goodness, he was playing in pro leagues when he was 17 years old with the Ignite. Showed some real stuff there, at the time, even if it wasn't, their kind of equivalent of like silly season, I guess you could call it. But I mean, he does a lot of stuff. He is someone who could be like that jumbo guard, wing type guy. He's shown that he can pass it, shown on occasion that he can shoot it, even though like the numbers are like pretty rough. But he really just needs to go somewhere that he can shoot the 3. So I'm still interested in him. And then to touch on a couple other guys, I really like Zeke Mayo a lot out of Kansas. Shout out Point Made Basketball, who just interviewed him the other day. Big Zeke Mayo fan, great shot maker, someone who I think you could really get a steal on, especially if you take him in the 50s or something like that. And I'm also a big Amari Williams fan. I've kind of come around on him more from Kentucky. Really good shot blocker and defender. I think that's going to be someone like the Lakers or somebody late takes a flyer on. And I think he's going to work out really well. So I'm definitely an Amari Williams fan. So those would be my sleepers.
Yeah, I like the Amari Williams, specifically mentioning him to the Lakers. I think it'll be interesting to see if he falls that far, because if he does, we could be looking at a guy that actually gets a good amount of playing time in year one, that gets drafted in like the late, I guess that'd be big 55, would be mid 50s. But
yep.
And then the one Brian mentioned, Elijah Martin, I really like him as a late round sleeper as well. Ryan Nimhard, I think, just to see if he can be just a backup point guard somewhere and be a good solid ball handler. I think that a number of teams could use a player like that, but
totally,
we'll see what happens with a lot of these guys. Probably tomorrow. We'll probably see what happens on Thursday, unless somebody makes a dramatic rise. But yeah, should be a really fun draft. Before I let you guys go, what content can we be looking for from you guys? I know there's been, obviously Brian's been doing these scouting reports for forever, and Zach, you've been putting together content as well. What should we be looking out for, and where can we find you guys' work?
Yeah, gosh. I feel like we've been cooking so much recently. We've got a lot coming. You can find us at Dizzle Dynasty, or Brian's at right there, WERIDOS 1221. We've got a lot coming though. We've got some dynasty ranks. We've got rookie ranks that are gonna be coming out immediately after the draft. We've got some more player profiles. We're going to be covering some more things over the summer, like kind of stock report type stuff where, we kind of just check up on heat checks for players. A lot of content coming for Dynasty and for just general NBA news. We've got a lot planned this year, man. Making the jump into some video content, some more podcasting stuff. Again, continuing with Brian's scouting reports because he has been absolutely crushing them this year. We've got a lot coming, so please be sure to follow us if you want to tune in for that. You really won't regret it. We got a lot coming.
Yeah, and just a quick shout out as well. We have a ultimate mock draft coming out today where we have a mock draft where there's a bunch of trades and we basically take our guess on what's going to happen. You can follow us at dizzledynasty.com or dizzledynasty.substack.com. And we have been transitioning into our website. So that's been fun as well.
Yeah. So if you're looking for in-depth content, you guys heard them talk for an hour about a bunch of things that were very in-depth. So if you liked that, if you want to get more of that, you can see Brian's Twitter handle on the screen. It is Weirdos, but with a slight switch up just to mess with you. And then at Dizzle Dynasty, you can also find their content there on Twitter. And then, as I mentioned, the Dizzle Dynasty websites as well. But that's going to do it for this episode, fellas. Thank you guys for joining me for this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be looking forward to having you guys back on. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. And we will see you guys after the first round of the NBA draft.